Paul talks here about his aspiration to bring that kind of wisdom, to engage in that kind of conversation, to see that kind of witness to the power of God. Ever since the creation of the world, his eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things he has made. So they are without excuse. He's talking about people who don't understand the theological importance of the testimony. They are without excuse. They became futile in their thinking, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling a mortal human being. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. All of this history, then, creation itself, the witness of God through the people of God, the coming of the law, the speaking of the word, I appeal to you, sisters and brothers, therefore, by the mercies of God, to be transformed in your minds. We go back to that wisdom of God. Not just transformed in your hearts, not just transformed in your actions, but transformed in your minds, so that you might participate in that wisdom of God, might see the world rightly, which means to see God's fingerprint in the creation, to understand God's witness in history, and to know that you are a part of it. Paul is a great thinker, but this chapter of Romans is not, even though it's about the transformation of your minds, it's not all about ideas or thinking or even heart transformation. It's also about acting. Do not be conformed to this world. As you might imagine, at the Women's Division, there's a lot of work going on right now to prepare for Assembly. We're very excited about Assembly 2010, and I hope that we will see many of you in St. Louis in the spring. One of the things, of course, that we're doing is looking at our history. And you already know from what I've said tonight that is one of the things that really engages me. So every so often someone will come into the office and say, "You've got to read this," or "Did you know?" or "Do you know this story?" And one of the things that has really hooked us as we've prepared, as we've begun this preparation and as we've moved along, is the description of United Methodist Women's predecessors as those unreasonable women. I kind of like it. My mom might not have liked it, but she might say that I have been destined to be a faithful United Methodist woman for a long time, if that's what it takes to be unreasonable. But it's a description of a little bit of dissonance with the expectation of the speaker. In this case, it was a church official. We don't have to talk much about that, but United Methodist women, we don't really, do we? For a long time, United Methodist women have not been conformed to the expectations, even of the church culture. It's very important. It's very important. One of the things that we accomplish by coming together is that reinforcement, that wisdom that appears among us as we say, this just didn't seem right. Or, we might have done it that way before, but what about, or, someone said this to me, and it didn't sit right. Why do you suppose that is? Wisdom is part of that engagement, of sorting out our thoughts, engaging with the text in a different way, bringing our experience into the life of the community, and seeking for that fingerprint of God in the work that we're about. So it's okay to be named those unreasonable women. Sometimes it's part of not being conformed to this world. Those social patterns that affect the church, that affect our families sometimes, that affect our congregations, are not holy just because they exist. One of our calls is to bring the holy into existence, to change the patterns, to engage the systems, to stand up, to speak up, and to change what is, to make it more holy, to help us move forward in this process of sanctification, as Wesley would say, this journey of discipleship, this experience of faith, engaging with the world in ways that make a better place for all of the people whom God loves. So we're not to be conformed to this world, but we're to be transformed by this renewing of our minds so that we can see what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Paul goes on then to talk about the role of the individual and the role of the community. And this text is in your program book, and I thought it was particularly appropriate for us to talk about tonight and on Sunday, because we're going to be thinking about the hymn text, Many Gifts, One Spirit, that was commissioned for United Methodist Women Assembly, and we're going to be talking about what it means to be sisters with a purpose. So we're not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. It's interesting because the biblical text often instructs the believer to be meek, to take a step back. Don't take the higher place at the table. Wait to be invited, to be honored. Don't honor yourself. Sometimes that's not quite the instruction that women need.